of Marshall's decision to set a precedent that logic equals law.
Are we filming?
I think, but are we supposed to first talk about is this a legally sound rule?
No, that's in the paper.
Yeah, so I thought that's what we're supposed to do now.
Alright, we are filming.
Hi.
I thought we were supposed to be discussing.
Are we supposed to be talking about is this a legally sound?
You can talk about whatever you want.
Okay, in that case we can talk about whatever you want.
Wait, guys, first I think we should introduce ourselves to the camera.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, let's go.
We each have our own authority name.
No,
Hello. I am Prime Minister Lana Jacobs.
Welcome. Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm a 12th grade Supreme Court student.
I'm Martin.
Dean.
I'm Sydney, I'm the Supreme Leader.
I'm Jacob, I'm the more Supreme Leader.
Martin Humansky, just to clarify.
Lee Buganol.
Okay, so Alana was mentioning something she wanted to talk about. We can write it down. What was
I would like to talk about the fact that in Marshall's ruling, when he's talking about how by logic's reason that based on our own laws, the Constitution should have power over everything else. And he's saying by logic, we should therefore have a rule that we should have judicial review. So my question is, yes, implicit logic,
implicit logic of judicial supremacy?
Of not, yes, that's what he's saying. But what I'm saying is that's how he did it. But what I'm saying is that then gives power to logic. So does that then mean that he's setting a precedent where logic can be used to answer away a case or answer a case?
I think the question is, sorry. I guess my question is then what else is the whole point of interpretation and then what is the point of anything? Because you need to have yes, things can be implied and you can reason them out through logic. You have laws and you could say that yes, we're taking a strict literalist approach and that it just has to be whatever's, it's kind of what Mr. Cannon brought up yesterday in terms of postal stuff.
Well, I'm not talking about just, what do we think this says in the Constitution? I'm talking about he literally brings in a separate case of we say this oath as judges, therefore,
So
why would we say this oath if not this? And that has nothing to do with the law. So
I think that's the spirit
I'm
of the law.
wondering,
Reading
but
between
I'm
lines,
saying,
seeing
are you
what
allowed to
happens
say,
is
oh,
what
this
I
is in the spirit of the law? Is that a thing you're now allowed to do?
But I think it is reading. His argument was reading the law and reading the logical implications of the law. That does, that is kind of, yeah, that's an important nature of how law works. Because otherwise, if it wasn't about taking the logical reading of it, then they'd be just jump over. I was gonna go under.
Red Rover.
I mean, yeah, I guess I just wonder, if you can't in a ruling or because essentially what we're doing, they're Marshall's arguing for his point, and law is essentially you're arguing for your interpretation of what this says, be it if it's a constitutional question or if it's just how much damages does this guy have to pay because he killed my uncle or whatever, bizarre example, but even if it's not necessarily a constitutional challenge, ultimately you're making your argument in whatever way, and if you are sworn to this by reciting something, I feel that would be evidence that you could use, and I don't think that's too far-fetched.
I mean, I agree, and I think that elaborating on that, one of the things about the Constitution is was written a really long time ago, and if we say we can only follow exactly what it says, it's going to be behind the times. As time goes on, we have to interpret new ways to read the Constitution, as they come up in our society.
Yeah, I would agree with Sydney. I think logic becomes law because we have to use logic because there's so many things the Constitution could not have foreseen. So if we're going to just only have powers which the Constitution thought of, then how do we deal with new inventions and how do we deal with new problems?
I agree as well. Sorry. No, go ahead.
I agree as well, because if you think about it, the Constitution was written by a bunch of white men. And America has evolved so much since then, so it just it doesn't make sense that we would follow this Constitution that is just so different, that was written in a time that's just so different than America.
As
So, like,
Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, the we the people who wrote the Constitution are not we the people now.
It's very true.
I think there's also, like, to the point of the Constitution having to develop, I think, the more of it, less of it, like, I think logic can be used, logical reading of the Constitution sure can be used to modernize the Constitution. I think, like, more to that point than just, like, the act of amending it. Like, there are plenty of important things that are integral to society that aren't from, like, logical readings of the Constitution. They're from, like, the Constitution is wrong, so we have to add to it.
Yeah, and one line, just that I found that Marshall closest line, the judicial power is extended to all cases arising under the Constitution. But, like, that's only part of it. The actual line is the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under the Constitution of the laws of the United States, blah, 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 and treaties made or which shall be made. So I think putting that phrase in there also is just, like, showing how there is opportunity for change, whether it's making a treaty or revising a law.
We want to go into if we think that. I mean, I think implicit in this discussion is, like, I guess a lot of what you were getting at, like, what makes, like,
What
a
makes
sound legal ruling
Yeah.
to begin with, or, like, what is, like, the purpose of having, like, a sound legal ruling.
Or like, what is, in an example, rulings can be absolutely absurd so long as like the judge said, oh, this is sound and here's my reasoning. A single judge could be ruling on a case and they could say, oh, like,
That's what I say.
no.
Like, that's why we have the appeal system.
But that's the problem with the Supreme Court.
Well, the Supreme Court is 9 judges.
I know it's 9
6,
judges, but I'm saying if you have a majority in a very serious case,
But that's
and
the reason why it's so
Yeah.
hard to become so difficult to become a Supreme Court justice. Like, the goal of it is to need to be a good person with good moral reasoning.
but even if you
And at
have
least-
good moral reasoning, even if you're a good person, if you have one
Where have we seen this fail?
if you have one very, very specific implicit bias, let's say religion, and there's a case that comes up about abortion.
Well, they're supposed to recuse themselves.
They are, but they don't have to. There's
Okay,
nothing.
so maybe the question here is, like,
The last question is,
Like, supposedly.
doesn't that just leave us completely vulnerable to a single law we cannot change for a number of years until we get another majority that will change it?
Well, maybe,
is it-
but if there's another, that's kind of the cool thing about having test cases, is that, like, you could, I feel like if it's maybe a different case, you could maybe have a different outcome, and it could still go all the way to the Supreme Court, potentially. And also, I think this goes back to, like, me questioning, like, this judicial supremacy thing, and, like, Thomas Jefferson's whole arguments, and, like, wondering, like, well, why do we have people become Supreme Court justices who aren't elected by the people, or, like, why do these 9 people who aren't even necessarily, like, our direct representatives have this much power?
Yeah, so I think
I don't know, I kind of relate just like to the Mishnah, or like the Midrashim by rabbis, and we listen a lot to rabbis' interpretations of what they can say about Jewish law. But what gives those rabbis the power to like create like so much change within Judaism? And I think I think it's really like similar. Like I think rabbis always make sure to like hold true to the foundation of Judaism, but they're not afraid to like steer away to it in order to like improve Judaism and improve Jewish texts. So I think like kind of
You're saying the government being the
yeah, I think like Supreme Court, they're definitely like holding
The judiciary.
yeah, I think they're holding on to American values, holding on to like what makes America America, and like freedom of speech, whatever. But they're also saying like, look, we also need to make these changes in order to improve America.
I think part of that is supposedly judges are supposed to be impartial and supposed to not have they're not like they have to have as least bias as possible, and as promoting the Constitution as possible, and like that was enforced about up until like a few years ago. A Supreme Court justice would need 60 out of like 60 votes in the Senate to be confirmed. So they, in the last few years, changed it to 50. And like that, part of it was to ensure that like it wouldn't now with like justice are effectively confirmed on party lines, like by because it's much harder to get like 60-40 split in the Senate, and like, but like, usually for that you need to like actually put some forward who is like who the other side,
Who's centrist to
yeah,
accept
who
that
feels-
everyone can agree.
yeah, exactly, like who isn't so outrageously biased that like, the other side will not be able to.
I mean, I agree
That's
with
not
you,
fair.
and I also think that going beyond who is on the Supreme Court, like having the Supreme Court doing judicial review in general, I think is very much alluded to in like the Constitution. And like, there's so many laws that are like clauses that say like with such exceptions or like necessary and proper that give the opportunity for change. And I think judicial review is like working on that ability to change our laws and better our society.
And why would those clauses be there if the Constitution did not want
Yeah, exactly.
the judiciary to evolve the
If
Constitution?
they didn't
Like,
want
I-
things to change, they wouldn't
Well,
say that you
Yeah,
can
I
change
think,
things.
I think explicitly, sorry. I think
Yeah,
they're, like explicitly what they're saying is it's like the framers of the Constitution saying like we do not know every legal problem that will come up. We do not know every like intricacy in the system we've created, and like we don't know how the world is going to change and develop over however long our nation survives. So like we have these things in like we have these clauses that can be that let's say necessary and proper or whatever because like we are not certain, and like we know that there will be things in the future that we did not think about that will like, be very important for the government to do.
I wonder if the founding, sorry, can I just ask a question, but then like, I just wonder if the founding fathers thought that the Constitution would actually last this long.
Why not?
No.
Okay, so one thing that I am thinking about is it seems like all of us right now are agreeing that judicial review is a good thing. Is anyone able to play devil's advocate with that and go to the other side?
I wonder, I mean,
Or not a good thing,
what
but
I was
it's bad.
alluding to earlier was I think the concept that the Constitution is fallible and that there are things that like, that the framers of the Constitution understood that like it would need to be subject to some changes as time elapsed. I think that is implicit, and I think that makes a lot of
But
sense.
I don't think that's. Sorry, I don't think that's the job of necessarily the job of.
So
judicial
that-
review. I think
that's-
that's more of the job of like amendments.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that's the job of amendments, but I also think I think also the framers of I think there is a question about like what does it mean to be like I think not just the fact that it's changing or the fact that it's changing would mean that some laws might need to be interpreted. Like you need to have I don't know, I think more than just like adding or changing a law is really understanding what it means, and I think that I would agree with Marshall that would be inherent. I think that you can find logically, not explicitly, an argument for that within the Constitution or the practices surrounding the Constitution, but I don't necessarily think there's anything in that which specifies that it's the judiciary's role to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think
Right,
that
so-
if you're talking about legally wise, I think that judicial review has to exist because it's there is no really power without it, like in the Supreme Court, and there's no point, and logically it does exist. However, legally there is no like specific reference. Like that's why judicial review is there, because in the Constitution things are too vague. But if there's not a specific thing in the Constitution saying Supreme Court will have the ability to like do this.
But I don't think it isn't about like. I don't think it is something that needs to be stated in law because I think it's just
Agreed.
implicit from the existence of laws that like
But if
the
you're saying it's
interpretation of them.
implicit, you could
like,
also say that about any other law. You
But-
could say, oh, freedom of speech, that's clearly implicit that I can threaten someone's life.
Yeah, that's so real.
like, look, that's
That's a real issue, I know, but I'm saying, how is that any different than
No, but I
saying
mean, like,
that,
elaborate on
how is that any less valid
I don't
than the
think
Supreme
it-
Court
because I don't
having
think-
judicial review?
Because I don't think that like because I don't think first of all I don't think judicial review comes from the Constitution. I think it comes from just like the very idea of law itself.
exactly.
Like no, it's not anything. Like I think it's inherent to like any form of law that like when you have a law that is put to the Constitution is like to a higher standard of law, which like is inherent by the fact that it's harder to make a constitutional amendment, and that the Constitution gives the power to make other laws, and that's so I think that is like.
Yeah.
So you're
based on
saying
the
it's
Constitution
like-
that it supersedes it, and then saying that like it's the role of a court to rule on laws, and that includes ruling on conflicting laws. So like, it is, so like, so when two laws conflict and one law is a higher, like more important, like a law that is like held to is the highest one, the higher level law, but like obviously you have to rule through that law, which is why judicial review is just inherent in like the existing legal system, not from any like official rule.
And also, I think that's another reason to say screw the Constitution.
Once in a while.
Because it's just like, it just doesn't make sense. Because really, if you think, I mean, judicial review, yes, it might be unconstitutional, but if you think about it, like the whole, like, I don't know, initiating of the Constitution and in America today would also be unconstitutional.
I was thinking that.
So like,
It's like the Constitution announces itself as superior, and like we're all saying that's okay. Judicial review is announcing itself as like superior to the law, and it's saying that's okay. And like you can't use like you can take both of them, right?
If you're bringing that up, I personally don't believe this. I agree with you, but I think there's this argument to be made that if you're going to just say the Constitution doesn't really matter, all it is us to interpret in our time period, like there's this argument that what happens though, like the Constitution is theoretically a ultimate, like timeless, correct, right way to think. And obviously we probably don't think that because of the time period, but think about our time period. Think about what if like our civilization devolves into something very immoral, but they don't see it as that. And then the Constitution is theoretically a way to guide us back to morality. Is it really though?
I don't think anyone
the
ever.
Constitution at will. Like
No. I don't think anyone ever was ever saying the Constitution is like infallible, perfect document of like your goodness. Because like by the nature of it, by the nature
Federal
of
government.
by the nature of it having like having these kind of like vague statements and having the ability to amend it is like by its nature saying, oh, it's not perfect. Like we realize that. We realize like there will be times where it needs to change, where it does not fit with like the moral like
we're talking in circles.
And even,
Yeah.
yes, we are, but just one thing is like, going back to what we looked at, I believe it was yesterday, like with the whole anti-federalist, like the paper or whatever things, it's clear that like there seems to be a consensus of understanding that if this Constitution is passed, then there is this power of judicial review, which is implicit in those powers which the Constitution is given. So like that is like, if the argument against it was that like it would give the judiciary too much control, then I think like obviously there's something to be said there about like what it's implicitly saying. I mean, I think ultimately I get back to an idea of like, my real question here is like, are the anti-federalists like and Thomas Jefferson right? Like should this, like, I don't know, is it right for the judiciary? Fine. Actually, I'm bringing us back to something we already went to earlier, so we don't have to go there. But that's, I guess, something that I'm still thinking about because it seems weird that it's such an indirect process to have these people who have so much power they're appointing.
I think part of this is like the framers of the Constitution didn't trust the people that much. Like,
Yeah.
that's why like senators were, for like most of history, senators weren't like elected; they were appointed by state governments. And a lot of time, like in a lot of states, the electoral college votes, those were just like chosen. The electors were just chosen by the state government. Like a lot of people just didn't trust the American people, and I think also like the idea of like. I think most Americans don't have that strong a grasp on constitutional law. I don't like, and would rather have
Show your power.
like, and also like would rather have like most people like when asked like what is the ideal Supreme Court justice, probably wouldn't say, oh, someone who has like a deep understanding of how the Constitution works and like is gonna be faithful about it. Say like a person who agrees with me and who's more in favor of my so like.
Yeah.
I think the reason, I think the reason it's like it isn't chosen like directly elected because the framers were afraid that they just elect like
Exactly.
people who didn't actually care about the Constitution.
But
Can we talk about
yeah.
judicial supremacy? Maybe, unless there's a law.
Do you want to say one last statement?
No, I thought we had been sort of talking about judicial supremacy, but I think we can continue.
Well, also, can we make sure to make time for exceptions clause? I really want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about exceptions clause. Yeah,
Just like what it means.
A lot of people were afraid, or by a lot of people I mean the other branches of government besides for the judicial branch were afraid of judicial review and the Supreme Court having it because they felt like it was going to take away power from them. And the judicial branch was suddenly going to become the most powerful branch because they could like change the Constitution however they want or do whatever rules that they want. But I don't think it's like that because the Supreme Court is limited by the cases that it gets. It does not get to straight up review the entire Constitution and go through and like go through the red pen and cross through
No,
stuff.
but they can make a ruling that eliminates one, and if it's semi-rotated,
The case has to come to
The case
them.
has to be appealed.
They don't
They
get to
have to be
choose what
appealed,
they
like,
appeal.
think about how many cases they get in a year.
Right, still, but that's very
But I
limited.
think
They're-
that-
they-
Is it
Can I say
five?
something?
yeah, no one gave them like the ring of power. No one gave them like the seal and a red pen and said go through the Constitution and just check what you like and cross out what you don't like.
I
It's like-
think that one of the things that you're referring to is that it's not just that they can make their own set of laws, it's only when something is already questioned and something is already being like thought about over and like confused about. That's not really English, but that's when they can make a decision. It's their job, if there's an issue with the Constitution or with the law, to determine what is the correct side to choose.
But they're also their justices. They just like they have to know what's just.
And also they have to answer the Constitution.
Yeah, I think also like
What they're doing is making something.
But I think Alana said this earlier, sorry, that technically if they all agree, they can like make up their own backing. It doesn't necessarily have to like exactly follow the Constitution. They can argue what they want to argue.
first of all, first of all, I think like
7,000 in a year, by the way.
yeah, no,
7,000
No,
or
5. No.
like
What is this?
Cases.
yeah.
7,008 a year.
Oh, requests.
Request. Okay,
Which-
go ahead.
But, I
Which
think,
means they could.
first of all, I think like it is very hard to get all, especially now, to get all 9 Supreme Court justices to agree on something, especially on how to like. But I don't think we're ever gonna in their lifetime we're gonna see the Supreme Court just like unanimously making proclamations on that have nothing to do with the Constitution. I think also the Supreme Court it does have effectively absolute power in reading what the Constitution means, but like that isn't I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Because that's not everything in government. That like there are tons of checks in the Supreme Court, from the cases that they're allowed to take, because 7,000 cases probably that's a lot of cases. It sounds like a lot, but it's not going to cover every single part of law. And there's always going to be some crazy guy who's I'm really pissed about getting traffic tickets, or I'm really pissed I got arrested for stabbing someone. So that, and also the fact that they're appointed by the Senate and nominated by the President and can be removed by Congress. But you can impeach a Supreme Court justice. And so if the justices started just saying we don't care about the Constitution, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the dictator of America now, the Senate would just be able to impeach.
But they shouldn't. She'd be the best evidence.
Oh yeah, I think that would be a great improvement for the nation.
I go full communist for her.
Also,
If she said we need to start putting people in prison for no reason whatsoever.
Okay. That's our best interest in her.
I'd assume she had a reason.
the opposite of judicial supremacy really doesn't work.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson said, I'm just going to read this again. My construction of the Constitution is that each department is truly independent of the others and has an equal right to decide for
That
itself
would be
what is the
bad.
meaning of the Constitution in cases submitted to its action, and especially where it is to act ultimately without appeal.
But
And so what he's doing
they
there
work
is
together,
he's
though.
taking a sledgehammer to checks and balances. The point of these 3 branches of government is to check each other and to make a balance of power. And he's saying each branch of the government should have unlimited power to do whatever they want, and the other branches cannot check them on
Am
it.
I wrong in saying
Are
that
we
they
doing-
can two branches can interpret a law a totally different way and both
Right.
act upon it in said way.
And both are valid for
Wait.
some reason.
Okay,
But that's
just to
really-
check,
I just,
can I just ask a clarifying question? Is it rock, paper, scissors where literally there's no overlap, where it's like president checks one of them, then that one checks the other one, and then that other one checks the president?
With
They all
what?
check something.
They all check each other.
Yeah.
No, I know, but I'm saying, how can the Supreme Court check Congress when Congress checks the Supreme Court?
like,
Assuming
Because
that both
Congress
of them
makes a
aren't
law.
corrupt.
Congress makes a law, and the Supreme Court says this law does not have constitutional basis, so therefore it should not be a law. And the Congress has a check on the Supreme Court because they can say, Mr. Justice person or Mrs. Justice
Not following the
person,
Constitution.
you're not following the Constitution. Your ruling doesn't have constitutional basis, so we're
I
gonna
thought that
take
was
you
the
out of
president that did that, though. I think that's the president. I think it goes
impeachment is.
Supreme,
like, the Congress.
yes, but I think the president is the one who
president gets to
carries out
appoint.
the Supreme Court.
Well, the president gets to
So
appoint
I
the
think
Supreme
it's
Court justices
Supreme
also.
Court is controlled by the president, Congress controls the president, and then Supreme Court controls Congress.
Either way, there are checks and balances, and either way, this statement by Thomas Jefferson, if it was put into our law, would make the system of checks and balances not
I
happen.
don't think it kind of happens though anyway. Like I think like one of the examples Mr. County gave was like the idea of the president just saying like, oh, this is unconstitutional, so I'm not going to enforce it. Like presidents don't enforce laws all the time.
Right.
And like
So that's kind of a check. That's kind of a check on the Supreme Court again, where the law, their statement doesn't necessarily need to be followed, and in a lot of cases it doesn't, and it can just get ignored, and there seems to be little to no repercussions because of it.
I think
What
legal-
checks? Sorry, no, you go.
I think like the American system is kind of built on the idea that like you can't like the entire like you'll never have a point where the entire nation is corrupted against the Constitution. Like if
Yeah, I feel like
the
this
president,
is-
like,
No, the
they
question
may have
is,
been wrong, but like if the president is like, I'm going to do something unconstitutional, or I'm not going to pay attention to what ruling, like that's why they have like,
well,
excuse me, so I'm dying.
As you were saying.
That's why we have like Supreme checks from the Supreme Court, checks from Congress, and while the president has like the kind of the big check of I'm in charge of the military, like officers and generals who are sworn not to the president to the Constitution and will like turn on the president if they, or at least hypothetically, will not follow like an unconstitutional order.
is the president, if the president does something that's entirely within her power to do,
So far, yes.
Their power.
her future,
It's her.
there,
Sure.
there, it's gonna be a two people and they have to decide, agree
Them
on everything.
decide.
That's what I'm gonna
The
do.
next
in my
president
opinion.
is 3 toddlers in a trench coat.
Yes, hiding. But the president, if it's something entirely in the president's power to do, the president does it. However, that thing is also incredibly, incredibly morally wrong, and it's like moving the entire army just to New Guinea.
You can't,
The entire army. Why not?
because Constitution will only declare when you're going to war.
It doesn't declare war, it just.
No, it's just moving them. It's not
Yes.
declaring war. It's just moving them.
Okay,
So
then
if the
Congress
president does
would
sue,
sue,
how
and
does
the
the
Supreme Court
Congress
would
do
say,
that?
well, I don't know, somebody would
Who's
sue
gonna
the
take
president.
power over the
Wait,
president?
I wonder.
The Supreme Court would rule that it's
So
unconstitutional.
then, does the Supreme Court move all those armies back into the U.S.?
Like, I
Well,
saw-
either you have the total disillusionment of like our whole like political system, which could happen, and then it's like a dictator, or the president listens
Well,
to the Supreme Court.
Dictator
Okay,
is
guys, I
a
think we're all
Okay,
I think we're all agreeing. I think we're all agreeing that checks and balances are good, and that everyone should have to agree on the interpretation of the law, going through like
Wait, what do you
whether-
mean every?
that like the 3 branches cannot interpret the law independently; they have to agree.
There needs
No,
to be
they don't
checks.
have to agree. I mean, are you saying
Or
that in our
not
system?
each branch of government should not have judicial review
Over itself.
for themselves.
Oh,
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Because Congress can just like, if there, let's say that perhaps maybe there was a corrupt political party that only cared about white men and Christians and they went and they somehow got a majority in the Congress and they made a law that was unconstitutional, but they could basically just claim for themselves, oh, this is constitutional, we're going to intentionally misread the Constitution in a way that allows us to make this law so that we can have this law that we believe to be good. If they have judicial review onto themselves, then that law stays. But if they don't have judicial review, then, and if only the Supreme Court has judicial review, then that law doesn't change.
And also, there is one like big check that Congress and the president that are like we're not really paying attention to, which is
the people.
Yeah, exactly. Like if your hypothetical party existed, like who knows? Maybe after they do that, maybe in some like say a midterm election, they would lose and vote to the House, maybe 40-ish seats.
Yeah, maybe that would happen.
However, what if,
I think it's
sorry, I'm spiraling, but theoretically, if before the midterm elections, Congress and the president completely change the government, then we're stuck.
Like in the thing that happened with the Judiciary Act, where they changed the government, and then they made it that they couldn't change the government, but then they had to change the government.
Stuart Breler.
Where I got a little bit confused.
If you want to move on to
Oh, actually, I changed my mind. Can we talk about why? Can we talk about why Stuart Breler was a better case, just real quick, like a couple points? It was a little.
It's just the
yes.
political context. Like if
Or why is it unconstitutional
I mean,
for...
basically, if Marshall wants to explicitly have judicial review, not just be kind of the implicit power as the anti-federalists explain here, but be an explicit power which is made in a ruling on the Supreme Court. If he wants to do that, the way that he's able to do that is sort of to appease the Democratic Republicans and to essentially like get them to actually win the cases, but to ultimately pass the idea of judicial review. So he like sacrifices essentially some of the Federalist justices, but ends up giving himself the whole power of the Supreme Court to interpret the Constitution. So he basically just gives himself a whole lot of power, but makes a really smart political move in terms of like letting go of these like whatever looser things.
like if Thomas Jefferson had tried to argue against him, would say, no, your ruling is wrong, and that you don't have judicial review, that it would be, either these judges you hate are in power, or worse for you, as we went over many times in class, the country collapses.
Maybe the real question.
Yeah.
Maybe the real question we should be asking is, should have Marshall been appointed? Like maybe it's just like Marshall as a person as well.
Marshall's fault.
I still can't tell if I like her or not.
Marshall?
I don't get what you're saying.
Like maybe he was
Did
just
you
like
say her?
maybe his motives were just wrong. That's all. It's really wrong.
Marshall, I don't think.
Well, you're saying
I think
either
he's
that
very
you're saying
clever.
that judicial
Not really
review,
type.
you believe that judicial review
Have you
is wrong.
seen?
I don't know.
In Circular, how was Congress
They avoid it.
taking away these seats unconstitutional? Basically why was the deleting of the seats?
Because the Constitution says that once you get elected as a justice, you get elected
For life.
So it's
Which
pretty clearly
is so
yeah, we get
awesome
Hello.
to me.
To me.
Okay.
To me, I think
feel
that's
like
so
if we
cool.
continue, we're gonna be spiraling.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's another questions about
I don't have
Okay,
enough.
not yet.
Okay.
Okay, why is this important at all?
It's okay. Why does it matter? Why are we studying this?
It doesn't.
Why did
No, I'm being very honest. It doesn't matter because ultimately, like we've come to the conclusion, at least in my understanding, that political context has everything to do with the fact that this was passed in the first place. But it seems that ultimately this comes down to an argument about whether the Constitution should have been passed or not, or
The
like
Constitution
if
itself.
the Constitution should have been adopted.
Yeah.
That's what I view this as inherently being.
Yeah.
Because it seems like anti-federalists, like Democratic Republicans and Federalists at the time, were sort of under consensus that the Constitution, if adopted, would kind of provide judicial review and supremacy. So.
Any other last
It's okay.
Questions real quick?
My dad wasn't
It's okay. It was way too long.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions about
We have all day.
the actual Marbury versus Madison ruling?
Okay, real quick. Interpretation of exceptions. Just clarifying. So pretty much, Marshall said that the interpretation of the exceptions clause is that you cannot add original jurisdiction cases, but I think that's wrong. So he's wrong.
Yeah, no, but it's okay that he's wrong. Everybody knew he was wrong. It's kind of like he
He's
read it in a
wrong,
weird
or-
way so that he could make the most politically wise decision, and our government would not literally collapse.
So he is smart in doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
So
he's
I'm
very, very
clear
clever.
about him being wrong.
So yeah, he was
wrong, and
I think you're legally,
You could like,
legally shoddy, politically
the
smart,
word sneak.
shoddy.
Oh, sneaky. Not shoddy. Sneaky. No?
Correct.
No?
sneak clever.
No? Like going under
The
sliding.
person.
Oh.
Freaking criminal.
Conniving. That works, yeah. It's a good word. I like your sweater.
The shop like this is really what's
Thank you. It looks so soft.
What
are you doing on the
This is really YouTube.
Bad. I think it got a nice shot.
Oh, geez, no, come on. You want to say that on camera?
This